I was 15 when it happened, the summer I decided I was too grown to waste the days just sitting around playing video games. I wanted to save for a beat-up car so I could get out of my boring little neighborhood. That meant getting a job, and the only place that would hire me was this old gas station about a mile from my house. It was one of those heavy summer days where the air felt like wet cotton, sticking to your skin no matter how many showers you took. You could hear cicadas buzzing constantly, so loud it felt like they were inside your head. That day, my shift ended a little after 8 p.m. because the manager made me sweep out the storage room. It was that golden hour where the sun was low, but the air still felt hot on your face. I didn't mind the walk home. My neighborhood was quiet, a sleepy place with cracked sidewalks and big trees that cast long shadows across the road. Halfway home, as I passed this empty lot with knee-high grass, I heard it. That warped, cheerful music of an ice cream truck echoing faintly just out of sight. It was strange, because it was nearly dark, and I hadn't seen an ice cream truck all day. The sound was hollow, almost metallic, like a music box underwater. I stopped, listening as the melody got closer, the notes stretching and slowing down like the batteries were dying. And then I saw it. This old, dented white ice cream truck turned the corner behind me, crawling down the street. The paint was chipped, and faded cartoon stickers of popsicles and smiling faces were peeling off the side. On top was a rusty speaker, the source of that warped melody, playing the same tune over and over. At first I thought it was weird, but maybe the driver was just trying to catch a last round of kids before it got too dark. I turned back around, trying to ignore it, but the hair on the back of my neck wouldn't settle down. I kept walking, and I could feel it creeping behind me, that music getting a little louder, a little more warped with each step. When I turned to look, it stopped, headlights flickering, the engine rumbling softly. The serving window was closed, but I could see a shape in the driver's seat, leaning forward like he was watching me. I tried to brush it off and kept walking, but I picked up my pace, my shoes crunching on the gravel, trying to act like I wasn't scared. I turned down my street, hoping it would keep going, but I heard the engine rev and the music grew louder again. It turned onto my street. The sky was dark now, the streetlights flickering on, and the truck's headlights glared in my eyes every time I glanced back. I crossed the street to the sidewalk on the other side, hoping it would keep going, but it pulled over to my side, matching my pace. I could see the silhouette of the driver through the dirty windshield, leaning forward, head tilted slightly, following my every move. My throat was dry, and I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, but then the truck stopped in the middle of the road, and the music cut off. The street fell silent except for the cicadas. I could hear the engine idling, deep and rattling like it was ready to lunge. The serving window slid open with a metallic screech that echoed down the empty street. At first, it was pitch black inside, but then I saw the outline of a head, the glint of glasses catching the streetlight. He didn't say anything. He just leaned further out and I saw the corners of a wide, crooked smile. That was enough. I turned and started jogging, trying not to break into a sprint, but the truck's headlights snapped on and the engine roared to life. The warped music started again, louder, distorted, like the speaker was about to burst. I broke into a run, cutting through a neighbor's yard to reach my driveway faster. As I jumped the small fence, I heard tires screech behind me, the truck turning the corner to follow. I could hear the music over the cicadas, getting closer, the notes twisting into something that sounded almost like screaming. I reached my driveway and fumbled with my keys, dropping them once, my hands slick with sweat. I could see the truck at the end of the driveway, headlights off now, engine idling, the driver hanging halfway out the window, watching me. I finally got inside, slammed the door, and locked it, pressing my back against the wood, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I peeked through the blinds, careful not to move them too much, and saw the truck still sitting there, the driver's pale face just visible, eyes hidden behind dark glasses, his mouth twisted in that same crooked smile. He lifted a hand, slowly, like he was waving at me. Then, without turning the headlights back on, the truck started rolling backward, disappearing down the street with the music still playing softly until it was gone. That night, I barely slept, every creak of the house making me think he was outside, waiting. But it didn't end there. 2 days later, our neighbor, Mrs. Landry, found her yard littered with melted ice cream and popsicle wrappers leading up to her basement window, which was cracked open. She said she woke up around 3 a.m. and heard a music box playing outside, but when she looked, there was nothing there. The same night, around midnight, I was lying in bed, finally drifting off when I heard it again. That warped melody, drifting down the street, faint but getting closer. I crawled to my window and looked out through the crack in the blinds. There it was, the ice cream truck, parked at the end of my driveway, engine off, headlights off, but that same song playing, slower than before, like it was falling apart. The driver was standing outside the truck this time, leaning against it, head tilted up toward my window. The moonlight caught on his glasses, and for a moment I saw his face clearly. His skin was pale, almost gray, with dark circles under his eyes, and his mouth was twisted into that same unnatural smile. His teeth looked too long, too sharp in the glow of the moonlight. He lifted something in his hand, and I saw it was an ice cream cone. The scoop melted and dripping onto the pavement, but he held it up like he was offering it to me. I ducked down, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the music anymore. I called for my dad, whispering, too scared to shout, and when he came into the room, the music had stopped. We both looked out the window, and the truck was gone, just an empty street and the buzzing of cicadas. The next day, I found a popsicle stick on our front porch, placed neatly in the center, with a dark red smear on it that looked like dried blood. We called the police, but they didn't find anything. They told us they'd patrol the neighborhood, but there wasn't much they could do. That summer, I started taking the long way home, sticking to main roads, avoiding quiet streets. Every time I heard the faintest sound of an ice cream truck, even in broad daylight, I felt that cold chill crawl up my spine. We never saw that truck in our neighborhood again, but sometimes, when the cicadas are buzzing and the air is heavy, I swear I can hear that warped music drifting in the distance. And every now and then, late at night, I think I see headlights flicker off down the street, or a pale face behind dark glasses watching from a parked van. Waiting. It was during a brutal heat wave last July, the kind where the air feels thick, sticking to your skin no matter how many showers you take. The heat was making everyone in town restless, and people would drag themselves into the grocery store late at night just to stand under the AC for a few minutes. I was living alone in a small apartment over the laundromat back then, working part-time at a bookstore, barely making enough to cover rent and instant noodles. One night, around 9:30, I realized I had nothing in the fridge except a bottle of mustard and a half-empty water jug. I decided to walk to the local grocery store a few blocks away to grab ice and some cold drinks. The streets were mostly empty, the heavy air buzzing with the sound of cicadas and distant barking dogs. The occasional car rolling past with the windows down and music blaring. The store was one of those small, family-owned places with flickering fluorescent lights and narrow aisles stacked high with dusty cans. It always smelled like warm bread and old cardboard, and the floors creaked under your feet no matter where you stepped. When I walked in, the cold air hit me, and I stood there for a second, just letting it wash over me, enjoying the momentary relief from the heat. There were only a couple of other people there. An older woman with curlers in her hair, picking through bruised peaches, and a man in the back arguing with someone on the phone near the milk coolers. I grabbed a basket and started picking out some iced tea, a bag of ice, and a couple of frozen dinners, taking my time since it felt so good to be out of the heat. That's when I first noticed him. At the end of the aisle, leaning against a shelf, was a man wearing a dirty gray baseball cap pulled low over his face. His clothes looked rumpled, like he hadn't changed them in days, and he was holding a single bottle of water, just standing there, staring down the aisle at me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People linger in stores all the time, and maybe he was waiting for someone. But when I moved to the next aisle, he followed, appearing at the end, standing there, not pretending to look at anything. I moved again, turning down the snack aisle, pretending to look at chips, glancing out of the corner of my eye. He was there again, standing at the end, staring. His face was partially hidden by the brim of the cap, but I could see just enough of his mouth to notice he wasn't smiling, wasn't frowning, just watching. My heart started to beat a little faster, and I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid. I moved to the freezer section and opened a door, pretending to browse, hoping he'd lose interest. But through the reflection in the freezer glass, I saw him standing a few feet behind me, still holding that single bottle of water, still staring. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the freezer, and I closed the door, turning to walk toward the checkout. He followed, his footsteps soft but steady, matching my pace exactly. At the checkout, I placed my things on the belt, trying not to look behind me, but I could feel him there, standing too close, his breathing just a little too loud, that stale, heavy air clinging to me as I tried to swipe my card with shaking hands. When I finally paid, I turned to leave. And he was right there, stepping aside just enough to let me pass, his head tilted down, that dirty cap shadowing his face. But I could see the glint of his eyes, still locked on me. As I walked out into the humid night, the air felt thicker than ever, and the lights of the parking lot buzzed and flickered. I glanced back through the glass doors, and he was standing there, still holding that bottle of water, staring at me. I walked faster, heading toward the sidewalk, the plastic bag of groceries swinging in my hand, sticking to my leg with sweat. I could hear the doors slide open behind me, and I knew, without looking, that he was following. I crossed the street, weaving between parked cars, trying to keep my pace steady so he wouldn't know I was scared. But inside, my heart was hammering. I glanced back, and there he was, crossing after me, not rushing, just walking with that same steady pace, the bottle of water still in his hand. I turned down the block toward my street, hoping to lose him. But when I looked back again, he was still there, the streetlight casting long shadows that made him look even taller, more imposing. I picked up my pace, turning quickly down an alley that cut behind the laundromat, hoping he wouldn't follow. But when I glanced back, I saw him enter the alley, the cap still pulled low, the bottle of water swinging at his side. That's when I started to run. The bag bounced against my leg, and I could hear the ice rattling as I sprinted down the alley, the darkness swallowing me, the smell of hot garbage filling my nose. I could hear footsteps behind me, faster now, matching my pace. I burst out of the alley into the small parking lot behind my building, fumbling with my keys, the plastic bag tearing and the ice spilling onto the pavement. I didn't stop to pick it up. I got to the back door and yanked it open, slamming it shut behind me, pressing my back against it as I tried to catch my breath. I listened, straining to hear, but all I could make out was the buzzing of a nearby street lamp and the distant hum of cicadas. Slowly, I crept to the window, peeking through the blinds. He was standing in the middle of the lot, looking around slowly, the bottle of water still in his hand. He looked up toward my window, and for a split second, I was sure he saw me. But then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving me standing there, shaking, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the cicadas anymore. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was long gone. They told me to be careful, to call them if I saw him again. But I could tell by the look on the officer's face that they didn't think they would catch him. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like him standing there, watching me. Over the next few weeks, I saw him again. Once across the street, leaning against a lamppost, the bottle of water still in his hand. Another time, across from the laundromat, standing there under the streetlight watching. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but every time I saw him, he was holding that same bottle of water, never drinking it, never letting it go. And then, one day, he just stopped appearing. I moved out a few months later, but even now, when I walk into a grocery store late at night, I can't help but feel that cold chill crawl up my spine when I see someone standing at the end of the aisle, watching. And I can't look at a bottle of water the same way again. Last July, we got hit with one of the worst heat waves I can remember. For 5 straight days, temperatures didn't drop below 95, not even at night. The air was thick, unmoving. It felt like the whole neighborhood was slowly baking under a heat lamp. Our AC unit was struggling. It barely cooled the living room, let alone the bedrooms. So like a lot of people on our street, we gave in and cracked the windows at night, just enough to let some breeze in. We left the fans running and kept the lights low. We didn't think much of it. We live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. One of those places with rows of small, single-story homes, chain-link fences, and the same 10 kids biking in circles all summer. Crime was rare. My parents were the cautious type, but even they eventually agreed it was too hot to keep the house sealed up. So we opened the windows, screens in place, nothing more. At the time, it felt like a reasonable trade-off. That changed around 3:15 one morning. I remember the time because I looked at my phone the moment I woke up. I'd gone to bed late and I was in that uncomfortable half-sleep, the kind where the fan is blowing directly at your face, but you're still sweating through the pillow. Something pulled me awake. At first I thought it was the heat again. I flipped my pillow to the cool side, turned over, and that's when I heard it. A soft creak, coming from the living room. Now this wasn't unusual on its own. The floorboards in our house have always made noise, especially when the temperature shifts. But this wasn't that. This wasn't random. This sounded controlled. I sat up in bed and listened. Another creak. Closer. Then, a whisper. Too low to make out. Just a hiss of breath, like someone talking to themselves but trying not to be heard. My heart dropped into my stomach. I thought maybe it was my dad up getting a drink of water. But something about the sound wasn't right. It wasn't the weight of someone casually walking. It was deliberate, measured. I swung my legs over the bed slowly and picked up my phone, ready to call my dad. But the moment I tapped the screen to unlock it, I heard another noise. Footsteps. Faint, soft, but moving. Down the hallway. My hallway. They stopped just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath. I could hear the fan whirring behind me, the blood rushing in my ears, and that awful silence on the other side of the door. Then the doorknob twitched. Not turned, just tested, like someone was checking if it was locked. It wasn't, and slowly the door began to open. I froze. There, standing in the hallway, just barely lit by the glow of the streetlight through the blinds, was a man, shirtless, pale, dripping with sweat. His chest rose and fell like he had been running. His skin gleamed. His face was partially hidden by a mop of damp hair, but his eyes were locked on mine. He didn't say a word. He just stood there. And I didn't move. For maybe 3 seconds, which felt like 30, I stared at him, and he stared at me. Then my instincts kicked in and I screamed. Loud, panicked, not thinking, just pure survival. The man didn't flinch. He turned his head slightly, like he was assessing how much time he had, then bolted. He spun on his heel and sprinted back down the hallway, moving like he knew the layout of the house. I stumbled out of bed and followed just behind my dad, who had flown out of his room the moment I screamed. We reached the living room just in time to see the man leap through the window, tearing the screen, crashing onto the porch. And then he was gone, into the humid night. My dad ran outside barefoot, yelling into the street, but there was nothing. No movement. Just the soft hum of the street lamp and the buzz of cicadas. I stood in the living room, shaking. We had been asleep, while a stranger was inside the house. And the front door, still locked. He came in through the window. He must have sliced through the bottom of the screen with something sharp, pushed it in, crawled through without a sound, while we slept. The police showed up about 20 minutes later. The officer told us, carefully, that there had been multiple break-ins in the neighborhood over the past week. Always during the heat wave, always at night, always through open windows. But what disturbed me most was something he said offhandedly while taking down the report. He said in 2 of the other incidents, nothing had been taken, nothing disturbed, just people waking up and realizing someone had been inside their house, just like us. He said it might have been a transient, or maybe someone mentally unstable. But he also said there was a pattern, and those patterns usually meant escalation. For the rest of that summer, we sealed the house up at night, no matter how hot it got. My parents bought window locks and motion lights. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to the bed and earplugs out, just in case I had to listen. The window was repaired, but the screen never sat quite right after that. It always had a slight bend in it, like a scar. Even now, years later, I remember the look on his face. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't drugged out. It wasn't confused. It was calm, calculated. He looked at me like he was deciding. And if I hadn't woken up when I did, I honestly don't know what he would have decided.